Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, my entitled neighbor destroyed my property and turned my inherited house into literal firewood while I was gone for a while. To make matters worse, he then claims to be the new owner of my property. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the stories. I honestly think that sometimes people come from another planet and just don't know anything about how to behave. That's really the only explanation I can come up with for what possessed my neighbor to do this to me. Either he is crazy or just an alien, and honestly, I don't know which would be worse at this point. I live in a city, but my family has had property about an hour and a half away in a more rural area. My great-grandfather built a house out of wood he chopped himself and everything. By today's standards, it looks a little small, but it has a ton of sentimental value. The last owner of the house before me was my grandmother, who sadly passed away and left the house to me. My parents, for reasons that are not important, did not want it and could not handle owning it. I did not want to move into it, but I loved it as a small vacation cabin when I wanted to unwind. I work in tech support, but my passion is art, and the cabin was a great place to go for some quiet time to relax and do my art without distraction. I did not get out to it very often though, and my neighbor was eager to take note of that. What I am about to say that he did all happened during a period where I had not visited for a while. I was not aware of any of it until I came to visit and saw the horrors that he had committed. There was a basic fence acting as the property line between my property and the neighbors. He had purchased the land about a decade before and ever since has been trying to modernize things. Honestly, there is nothing wrong with a new fancy house in my opinion. It just looks out of place in the rural area where homes have stood for generations. Since I was not around, he decided that he could knock down the fence and just expand his property by taking over mine. All the trees between his house and mine were cut down by him and the stumps and roots pulled from the earth. These were healthy trees, by the way, large old oaks that I remember at one point my grandfather putting a tire of a rope so I could swing when I was younger. They gave great shade from the sun and of course were just beautiful. He did not stop there though, because next up on his path of destruction was my house. That's right, he decided that the house my great-grandfather built needed to be destroyed. Like I said before, it was all made of wood and he essentially used tree cutting tools to tear the entire thing down. Nothing was left and my entire childhood was now barren land. By the time I showed up, I saw roped off areas like he was planning to build something else in place of my house. I could not contain my rage and went right over to him as he was casually sitting around on my property. I also knew it was him because he was the only neighbor anywhere near my property. Me? What the hell did you do to my house? Neighbor, your house? It belonged to Grandma, and since she died, the property obviously transferred over to me. Me? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. This entire property belongs to me and you destroyed it all. That house has been around for generations and you did what? Bulldozed it down for no reason? Neighbor, the house was a piece of crap and is better off being firewood. You better get off my property too before I shoot you for trespassing. Me, it's not your property. Neighbor, I'm the new owner of this land and this is your last warning before you end up with a bullet after coming here and trying to threaten me. Yeah, he actually threatened to shoot me for being on my own property. This fight was not over though, and instead of punching some of his teeth out like I wanted, I went and found a lawyer. I had all the paperwork already that showed the property was mine. I even had an old land assessment that showed where property lines were, since my family just always had good foresight to have things like that. I was able to sneak back and take pictures when the neighbor was not watching to show that indeed my house and trees were totally gone. I was able to sue him for the destroyed property, but sadly, I knew that I was not going to get that much. The courts cannot put a price on how I felt emotionally to the house, only what it was worth. Due to the age, it was not going to be worth much at all. I felt horrible about that, but I still wanted to sue him and see what else I could get added on to really make him pay. That was gonna lie mostly in the trees, trespassing and fraud. Cutting down trees without any kind of permit is illegal in that area, and each tree comes with its own fines. This can vary a little bit, but cutting down 3 healthy oaks without a permit was going to cost him about $10,000 in fines or even more. He had spent several weeks trespassing on my property, and that was enough to get him arrested and held in jail until somebody could come and pay bail to get him out. Something like that was not going to get him very long in jail, if any, but it made me happy to see him get some kind of repercussion. Fraud though, now that was a big one. The rope that I saw was him planning to build another home on my property and hired a crew and everything. He forged paperwork that the land was his, and that was a huge no-no. His story of why the property belonged to him did not have a leg to stand on. The fraud was a separate case from me, so I don't really know what came out of that, but last I heard, he was under house arrest for something. I got money for the estimate of what the home would have been worth, and he was responsible for fixing the land the best he could. That involved paying to put new trees in and rebuilding the fence that he destroyed. The house appraisal was more than I thought it would be, and I had enough to do some slow work to build another cabin where the old one stood. I knew that it will never be the same, but I want to try and put the same heart into it that my family did. An old-fashioned wood house without anything modern about it. I hope by the time I have great-grandchildren, they will still have the cabin and big oak trees to play underneath like I did. I also hope that the neighbor moves away before anything else bad can happen. I installed cameras as the only modern thing just in case he tries to pull a fast one, in which case I will have police coming after him before he can do anything. He wanted to turn my house into firewood. I was gonna make sure that the only thing that burned was all of his money between his lawyer and the fines. And yeah, ripe stars, I would almost say that the neighbor in this story kind of got off easily because I would have expected that the trees would cost even more. I guess big oak trees can run anywhere from, let's say, $50,000 to even $200,000 or something like that. At least that's what we have seen in other stories. But then again, maybe these trees were not as tall or not as old as the other ones. The next one is titled Revenge on Dumb Company Boss. So last year our company went through a reorganization, in other words fire people and give more work to people still left with the company while paying us peanuts. We are a small company with less than 200 employees and trying to retain our government customers while big companies like Amazon Cloud will replace us in less than 10 years. The government customers love working with us because it is the only thing we do and treat the customers better than big contractors who don't care. They laid off 30 people from my team of 50. So now 20 people do the work for 50 people at the same salary. We are paid by the month and not work hours, and we don't get sales bonuses, which is important in the story. I got a habit of reviewing everything carefully and spending hours on each contract, even one that just makes us a few $1,000s. Government vendor selection process is slow and they are very risk-averse, so a lot of customers start a few $1,000s and end up in an 8 or 9-figure contract if everything goes well. Since people were laid off, I was struggling with the work volume and as a result, contracts were piling up. The sales director, in other words different team, did not like me as I was slow and also catching any tricks the sales team tried to play by overpromising the customer or something shady. Government clients and customers loved working with me, the support I provided, and was truthful regarding our capability and our drawbacks. This was something else the director hated me for since he thought I am tanking sales. However, almost all my clients were repeating customers for over a decade. Example, sales wanted a school district to buy outdated Dell Windows laptops while the entire state was moving towards new cheaper Chromebooks. Schools don't have budget and whatever they buy stays for 5+ years. Sales were offloading expensive useless stuff to get better bonuses and also charge customers nearly $1 million to provide IT support for faults arising from ancient hardware. During my conversation with the school district, I shared examples of state governments in the Northeast buying Chromebooks and saving money while future-proofing the hardware. My job was to get the best quote to the customer and develop trust to sign a 5 or 10-year contract. So this school district bought Chromebooks which were 40% cheaper and had less than 20% of the previously quoted IT support cost. As a result, the sales team lost a few $1,000s in bonus, but we brought this customer with us for a 5-year contract. The sales director got pissed as I was working on small contracts at a slow pace and reprimanded me in front of our manager. The manager did not care and did not defend me and asked, "Why don't you follow what the sales director says and stop fussing over small contracts?" I said small contracts turn into big ones and hence I should pay attention to them as well. Mistakes in small contracts could harm us if the contract becomes big. So I am struggling at work because you gave me the job of 3 or 4 people. At this point he was shouting at me that I don't understand contracts. He has been doing this stuff for 5 years and he makes more money in a month than I do in a year, so I should listen to him and not question him. This was a bit insulting as I live in a shared apartment and I am struggling to make ends meet while he drives an expensive luxury car and just goes out on fancy lunches with government employees. I asked the sales director to send an email with a list of suggestions to improve my work. He then rudely complied and said, "Can you not even remember what I just said in the meeting?" His email said, "Don't review contracts less than 100k and trust sales team that due diligence has been done." I replied by copying my manager in the email that this could create liability in the future and want him to confirm again that the sales team will do financial and legal compliance themselves for the small contracts, and I need to stop revising small government contracts below 100k with no exceptions unless told otherwise. This was gold. So cue the malicious compliance. Instead of 2 hours, I spent 10 minutes on small contracts and voila, backlog cleared and I am home by 6:30 p.m. Now, a contract worth 10k comes through. I found some issues with this contract since it said that we offer 30% rebates to our software providers. This was something we stopped doing 5 years ago and now we just offer software providers a 5 to 10% rebate on contracts. Also, I knew the government client recently got a massive budget and was on a spending spree, which is part of my job. There is a high chance that this $10,000 customer will become a $100 million one and the 30% rebate means we have to give $30 million on top of the usual cost. But I remembered what the sales director said and why don't you follow what the sales director says and stop fussing over small contracts? So then, 10 minutes later I email, "No issues detected based on compliance check by the sales team." As I mentioned, government contracts are slow, no one cared and raised the 30% rebate issue since it was just a $10,000 customer. 10 months later, the state government customer said they want to work with us and get at least the same terms or better terms for a new $50 million contract. This was the largest contract in our company's history. The sales director happily gave him a handshake deal that we will offer the same or better terms. Government can legally just buy more on their current contract, so the sales director had no issues promising the same terms. Given the contract size, everyone from legal, IT and finance gets involved to work on just one contract. For 3 months, everyone worked on one contract. The sales team was giddy that they will get $1 million bonuses. I don't get a sales bonus to ensure I protect customers and the company. The finance team finishes their review and said the company is gonna lose $8 million and not make any money. Everyone is shocked. The sales director gave a deal without checking with us and we cannot go back on something we offer. Changing contract terms is frowned upon by the government and they have legal contracts stating, "Nothing will change." We are legally obligated to offer the government the same terms for 3 years. The legal team says we need to take a hit on our balance sheet and swallow the losses. The CEO called a big meeting in a fancy conference room with big TV screens and everyone had to find a scapegoat to take the blame. Every department lead, managers and people involved in this contract were summoned. The sales leader had to explain to his team why they won't get bonuses on this big contract they spent over 3 months on. Finally, legal and finance meet and share their findings. We lost money due to the 30% rebate clause. The sales director goes crazy and blamed me in front of everyone and asked me to pack my stuff in front of 30 people. Follows by saying that I am terrible at my job despite 100% customer satisfaction. So I calmly opened my laptop and connected the display cable and opened Outlook while displaying his mail on 3 big TV screens stating that I should stop reviewing small contracts. While all 30 people read the email with a faint smile, I await the sales director's reaction. He goes into rage mode claiming I misunderstood his email and I am terrible at my job. Then I scroll down where he ignored my warning regarding potential liability to the company and his response explicitly asked me to ignore that. His face turned white when he realized he effed up. He then blabbered trying to find some other scapegoat making racist tirades against our IT consultants in Vietnam and just lost it. Aftermath, I was told to spend 2 to 3 hours on each contract and the company eventually figured out that it is cheaper for them to hire 20 people like me and pay us 70k every year than to take big losses on their contracts. Our team has 40 members now, still less than 50, but enough to offset the contract volume. Because of the losses, sales director had to pay back his previous year's bonus as he had a clawback clause with the company. In other words, if you screw up, you need to pay us. The sales director had to pay nearly $300K and was fired from his job. The present day, he then sued our company for wrongful termination, and we just heard today that he lost the case and now owes us another $200K in legal fees. Now he owes over $500,000 to our company. Update number 1. A lot of people may ask why I am still doing this job which pays less than state wages and I might be able to make more in other companies. So I help government customers buy good stuff from many hardware and software companies so they don't overpay or rely on one big company. I feel proud when I can save tax dollars and help customers. During COVID, a lot of state governments went remote, in other words local meetings on Zoom and keeping the government running while working from home. There was a budget freeze due to COVID, the economy shutting down, and since COVID relief bill was months away, this was a time when the sales team had helpless government customers willing to sign anything just to get remote hardware and software. I saw this as extortion, and despite being an introvert who lacks initiative to get promoted, I was able to convince the CEO to offer free 60-day trials of expensive hardware and just charge setup and transportation fees. This was a big risk, but we brought an insurance company to offset any damages. I convinced the CEO that this is the time for us to show that we are partners with the government and it was an emergency. The sales team was mad for a month and then realized that all those free customers were calling us for paid contracts over companies that are 10 times our size that would usually win contracts by lobbying or taking government decision makers to expensive lunch or something like Super Bowl tickets. I legally cannot disclose the exact government entity by name, but I can vaguely say that some entities in the state government of New York and the state government of Florida were both using this trial program during the first wave of COVID. I might change jobs soon since we got a 3% salary hike in the current market while the company has nearly doubled its revenue in a few years. Update number 2, I just remembered another story that made sales leaders hate me even more. So this was during the COVID wave when we were all working from home and I was getting used to Zoom. We had a telecom contract with the state government during COVID and everyone joined a Zoom call to discuss the contract. The sales team was increasing this customer's telecom bills from $60K a month to $300K a month. I objected that increased calls during COVID are not high enough to justify such a big price hike and we should increase the bill to $100K a month. This was enough to cover the cost and even improve profit margin %. But the sales team started laughing and saying if the customer can pay more and is ready to pay more, why am I being so vocal? Leadership asked me to shut my mouth and proceeded with a $300,000 contract. So then I started working on some other stuff and minimized the Zoom app. I don't end Zoom calls myself as the meeting admin ends it. Everyone said, "Bye, nice meeting you all," and I naively assumed the call ended. I vented my frustration by saying, these salespeople are like wolves when the country is going through crappy times. A coworker sent a chat message a few minutes later that everyone heard what I just said. No one complained or confronted me, but this offended them. Also wanted to add, all sales team members are not like this. Almost all the new sales reps are eager to learn from everyone and not pushing stuff but talking to customers. However, new sales reps mostly handle small or low priority contracts. Any big contract gets automatically transferred to sales leadership. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I have to say that was absolute textbook perfect malicious compliance. And if you have ever gotten malicious compliance in your life, for example in a company, at your job or anywhere else, please let us know in the comments. Either way, I hope you enjoyed today's video and I will see you again tomorrow.